My name is Darren Whitmore, and on August 17th, 2018, my life changed in a way I never thought possible. I used to think I had it all. I lived in downtown Vancouver, British Columbia, in a high-rise apartment overlooking the water. I was a senior partner at a global financial firm, known in the industry for closing major deals and building one of the strongest portfolios in our West Coast division. I live with my partner, Ryan. We've been together for nearly a decade, and to most people, we were the picture of success. Wealthy, well-traveled, surrounded by elite social circles, and proud of who we were. I wasn't just successful, I was celebrated. Articles have been written about me. LGBTQ+ panels had invited me to speak about empowerment in business, and clients admired my confidence and openness. But beneath that image, there was something I kept pushing down, something spiritual I had long abandoned. My mother, a soft-spoken woman from Saskatchewan, never gave up praying for me. She would call every so often, always ending with, "I just want you to know that God loves you, Darren." I'd roll my eyes and thank her out of politeness. But in my heart, I thought she was clinging to old-fashioned guilt and fairy tales. Then one Friday afternoon, everything snapped. I was pacing through the glass halls of our office building, prepping for a deal that had been dragging for 6 months. I hadn't slept well in weeks, and I had been ignoring the tight pain in my chest. I thought it was anxiety or maybe the espresso shots I'd been downing like water. I remember stepping into the boardroom, opening my laptop, and then it hit me like a sharp, crushing weight. My vision blurred, the room tilted, and I heard my own voice calling for help before everything went black. That was the moment I died. Clinically, they said my heart stopped for just over 7 minutes. But what I saw during that time, it was more real than anything I've ever experienced. At first, I was floating above my own body, watching people around me panic. My assistant was screaming. A junior partner was on the phone, begging for an ambulance. I could see everything, hear everything, but I felt no pain, no panic, just calm. And then, like being pulled by a current deeper than gravity, I was drawn out of the room, out of time, out of this world. It wasn't a tunnel of light like you hear about. It was like layers, sheets of living color and emotion, shifting, swirling, alive. I moved through them, and suddenly, I wasn't just watching my life. I was feeling it. Every conversation, every decision, every moment of love, cruelty, laughter, or silence was relived. But not just from my view. I felt what others felt too. I felt Ryan's loneliness every time I ignored him for work. I felt the sting in my mother's heart when I dismissed her faith. I felt the disappointment of those I belittled, the quiet admiration of interns I never noticed. Every moment mattered, every choice echoed. As I moved deeper into this place, the emotions grew heavier, more vivid. I expected some kind of peace, maybe even bliss, but instead, what I felt was a kind of reckoning, not judgment in the way people think of it, like someone wagging a finger at you. It was more like pure, unfiltered truth being laid bare. There were no excuses, no hiding behind my success or my pain or my past. It was just everything, all of it out in the open, and it wasn't cruel. It was honest, painfully honest. I felt exposed in a way I never had before. There, in that space, I realized for the first time just how far I had drifted, not just from God, but from who I was supposed to be. Then came the moment I will never forget. I didn't see him the way you see someone walk into a room. I felt him first, like the air itself knew he was coming. The colors around me changed. Everything became still. Then he appeared. I didn't need to be told who he was. I knew it was Jesus, not the version you see in stained glass windows or old paintings. He was brighter than light, yet not blinding. There was a kind of fire in his presence, Not heat, but something deeper. A truth so alive it felt like it could see through every wall I had ever built. I was terrified, and yet I'd never felt more safe. I wanted to fall to my knees and hide at the same time. He didn't speak with words, but he spoke to me, directly into my soul. And what he showed me broke me. He showed me people, faces, souls. Some of them I recognized, people I had known, people I had loved. Some were friends I'd partied with in West End clubs. Others were activists I had admired, leaders, influencers, bold and proud. He showed me what had become of them. And it wasn't peace. It wasn't heaven. They were in darkness, deep, aching, spiritual darkness. I didn't see pitchforks or red devils. What I saw was far worse. It was sorrow, regret, isolation that screamed louder than any physical torture. These people weren't there because they were gay. That wasn't the message. It was deeper than that. They were there because they had rejected truth. They had embraced a version of life that felt good, that looked like freedom, but was actually a lie, a counterfeit of something holy. Jesus turned his gaze toward me, and I couldn't bear it. But there was no anger in him, only sorrow. Sorrow so deep it made my chest ache. He showed me my own life through his eyes, my pride, my choices, the people I had influenced, the way I had lived as a symbol of success in the LGBTQ+ world, and how many followed my footsteps thinking they were walking into light, when in fact, they were walking away from it. I saw the ripple effect of my life, how my story, my image, my silence in the face of truth had shaped others' destinies. I didn't mean to lead anyone astray. I truly didn't, but that didn't change the fact that I had. Jesus didn't accuse me, but I felt it anyway. A conviction so heavy it could have crushed me. He brought me to a place I can only describe as a spiritual courtroom, but there were no walls, no judges, no gavels, only light. Light that revealed everything. I stood in the middle of this open space, and suddenly, scenes from my life began to unfold all around me. I saw every decision, every word, every relationship, laid out like a living map. I watched as moments I had long forgotten returned with piercing clarity. When I brushed off Ryan's fears and called him too sensitive. When I laughed off my mom's faith as superstition. When I encouraged a young intern, also gay, to live boldly, even though deep down, I knew I hadn't found peace in that path myself. Every moment played back, not to shame me, but to show me what I had become and what I could have been. Then Jesus showed me a book, glowing, pulsing with life. He opened it, and at the top of the page was my name, Darren Whitmore. The words below it started to fade before my eyes, and I panicked. I asked, though not with my mouth, "Why is it disappearing?" And his response wasn't spoken, but it filled my entire being. "Because your choices are erasing the story I wrote for you." That truth hit me harder than death itself. God had written something for me, a calling, a purpose, and I had spent my entire life writing over it. Not with evil, not with hate, but with pride, with comfort, with lies I had accepted as truth because the world applauded me for them. That applause was deafening down here, but in heaven it meant nothing. Then came the moment I never, ever wanted to see. Jesus took me to a place of unbearable torment. Not flames licking at people's skin, not devils with pitchforks. No, this was far worse. This was truth, fully known, but too late to act on. I saw souls crying out, screaming, reaching for light that they had once known but had pushed away. One of them I recognized. His name was Andre. He had been a speaker at one of the LGBTQ+ conferences I'd attended in Toronto. Funny, confident, brilliant. We had shared a panel together about living your truth. But here in this place, he was curled in on himself, hands clutching at the air, tears streaming down a face that could no longer hide behind applause. "I didn't know," he kept crying out. "I didn't know it was real." The sound of that will stay with me forever. Jesus turned to me, and I felt his heart break again. They weren't condemned because they were gay, his spirit said to mine. They were condemned because they followed their own will over mine, because they led others down a path I never intended for them, and because they never turned back, even when I called them over and over. I wept. I couldn't stop. For them, for myself, for the generations of people who are being told that love and truth are whatever we want them to be, that there are no consequences, that identity is fluid, but purpose doesn't matter. I saw now that it all mattered. Every step, every word, every influence we have on others. It all echoes in eternity. After that vision, I was taken to see what could have been. It wasn't just about what I had done wrong. It was about the life I was meant to live. Jesus showed me two paths. On one, I kept living the way I had been. I stayed with Ryan, grew older, got richer. I became more famous in business circles, maybe even wrote a book or started a podcast. But in that vision, I was spiritually hollow. The light in my eyes faded. My smile was there, but it was mechanical. I was surrounded by people, but completely alone inside. When I died in that version, I saw my soul drift away from God, not with screaming or fire, but with cold, irreversible distance. And I knew in that moment that was the default path I was on. Then he showed me the other path. This one started with rejection. I lost friends. I stepped away from everything I had built. I gave up my position, my reputation, even my relationship with Ryan. It hurt deeply, but then I saw people coming to me, people who had been in the same place I once was, young men and women who had been searching for identity, truth, peace. I saw myself speaking not from a stage of pride, but from a place of humility. I was different. I looked free. My eyes were bright again. My voice was steady. I was finally living the life I was created for, not without pain, but full of peace. Jesus looked at me and said, "This is still possible, but the choice is yours." And I made my choice, right there in that place. With everything in me, I begged him to give me another chance, to return, to live differently. I didn't care what I had to lose. I wanted that second path. I wanted to be who he made me to be before the world rewrote my story. I felt his hand over my heart. Warmth spread through me, not just physically, but spiritually. And then everything began to fade. The colors, the visions, the presence. I was being pulled back to my body, back to the hospital room. And I heard just one more thing before I opened my eyes. Tell them everything you saw. When I woke up, I was surrounded by machines, beeping monitors, the sting of IVs in my arm. My chest hurt like it had been crushed, but I was alive, truly alive. Ryan was there, holding my hand, tears in his eyes. The doctor said I had died for 7 minutes and 31 seconds. They called a miracle that I was still breathing, that there was no brain damage. But they didn't know the full story. They didn't know that I hadn't just come back from clinical death. I had come back from the edge of eternity. And everything in me knew I couldn't stay silent. The days that followed were some of the hardest of my life. I laid in that hospital bed with a body that was healing, but a spirit that was already sprinting. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't sit still. Everything felt different, like I had woken up in a world that wasn't quite real anymore. I kept seeing their faces, those people I saw in that place of torment. I heard their cries. I felt their hopelessness, and I couldn't shake the weight of responsibility Jesus had laid on me. Tell them. That's all I kept hearing, over and over. Tell them. When Ryan visited me again, I knew I had to be honest. I held his hand, and told him everything, every single detail. From the moment I left my body to the moment I saw Jesus, and what I saw about us, about the life we were living. I told him it wasn't just about sin or being wrong. It was about being separated from the one who made us. He stared at me like he didn't recognize me. For the first time in 10 years, there was silence between us that wasn't comfortable. When I finished speaking, he stood up slowly and said, "Darren, maybe this was just some kind of trauma, a dream. You were gone for a long time." I nodded, not out of agreement, but because I understood. How could I expect him to believe it when I didn't even believe things like this before it happened to me? Within 2 weeks of leaving the hospital, I made a decision that shocked everyone around me. I resigned from my position at the firm, walked away from millions in future bonuses. I deleted my social media. I moved out of the apartment Ryan and I had shared. The press tried to make sense of it. Some said I had a breakdown. Others claimed I had been targeted by some conversion group. A few headlines called me the former LGBTQ plus icon turned religious extremist. I didn't respond to any of them. I wasn't angry. I just knew this was the cost. Jesus had shown me the truth, and I knew I couldn't go back. Not even a little bit. No paycheck, no relationship, no applause was worth losing eternity. But here's the part that really broke me, in both pain and beauty. As word got out, people started reaching out. Quietly, privately, messages from young men I had met at LGBTQ plus galas. From women in business I had mentored. From teenagers who had looked up to me. Their messages weren't angry. They were curious. They were scared. Some of them said things like, "I felt empty too, but I never thought someone like you would admit it." Others said, "I've always believed in God, but I didn't know if he still wanted me." And one young man from Montreal said, "I was going to end my life until I saw your story. Now I'm trying church." That's when I knew Jesus was still working through me, that he hadn't just brought me back to save me, but to help save others, too. A few months later, I started something small, just a weekly Bible study at a friend's house. No big signs, no agenda, just a place for people like me. People who had lived a certain way for so long, but deep down, were still hungry for something real. At first, it was just 3 of us, then 6, then 12. It grew faster than I ever imagined. And the craziest part? Most of them weren't coming because of me. They were coming because of what I had seen. They weren't after religion. They were desperate to understand what eternity actually looked like, what truth really meant. And that opened the door for me to share everything again, over and over. Every time I told my story, I felt that same tremble in my chest I felt when Jesus stood in front of me. There was one night I'll never forget. A young guy, probably 19, came up to me after I spoke. His eyes were red, voice shaking. He said, "I'm gay. I don't know who I am, but after hearing what you saw, I think I want to find out what God says about me." I put my hands on his shoulders and told him, he's not ashamed of you, but he wants you to know the truth, and it's not something the world will tell you. That night, he gave his life to Jesus, not because I told him he had to change, but because he saw that love and truth can't exist apart from each other. That moment, that kid, I go through everything all over again just for that. It's been 5 years now. I live in a quiet neighborhood outside of Kelowna, not far from where I grew up. I don't have millions in the bank anymore. My suits have been traded for denim and hoodies, but I've never been more rich. I spend my time speaking in churches, schools, and sometimes even places that don't believe in God at all. The most unexpected people reach out. I've had coffee with drag queens, dinners with CEOs, conversations with people who once hated me for leaving the movement. But I don't show up with anger. I show up with the same sorrow and love Jesus had in his eyes when he looked at me. I show up with truth, because that's what saved me. I'll be honest, there are still nights where I wake up shaking. Sometimes I hear those screams again. Sometimes I see Andre's face. I remember the torment, the silence that followed their cries, the weight of knowing they didn't turn back in time. And every time I feel that ache, I get back on my knees and pray, not just for strength, but for them, for the people still living the way I was, for the ones who think this life is all there is, for the ones who are believing the lie that truth is relative and eternity is just a concept. If you're one of them, if you've made it this far into my story, then maybe this was for you. If you're still listening right now, I don't think it's an accident. I believe with all my heart that God wanted you to hear this story. Maybe because you've been questioning things lately. Maybe because you've been feeling that emptiness I once felt but couldn't explain. Maybe because deep down, you know the life you're living doesn't line up with the peace you're hoping for. I'm not here to shame you. I'm not here to scare you. I'm here to tell you what I saw. I'm here to say that Jesus is real. Hell is real. Heaven is real, and your choices matter more than you could ever imagine. You don't have to have it all figured out right now. You don't have to be perfect to come to God. He just wants your heart to turn toward him. That's it. That's where it begins. When I stood before Jesus, I didn't have all the answers. I didn't even know what to say. But he looked at me and loved me anyway. And that love changed me. He didn't just rescue me from hell. He rescued me from the lie that I had to be my own God, my own authority. And that freedom, that's what I want for you. Real freedom. The kind the world can't offer. If you're watching this and you're in the LGBTQ plus community, or you've struggled with your identity, or you've been hurt by church people who spoke more hate than love, I see you. I know what that feels like. But let me be honest with you. Being affirmed by people doesn't mean you're in alignment with God. I was affirmed for years. I was celebrated. I was called a trailblazer. And none of it saved me. But when Jesus called me, when he showed me the truth, I knew I had to choose. And you have to choose too. No matter what the world tells you, truth doesn't change. And it's waiting for you. So here's my invitation. If something in your heart is stirred right now, don't ignore it. Pray. Talk to God. Ask him to reveal himself to you like he did for me. If you don't know what to say, just start with this. Jesus, I don't know where to go from here, but I want to know what's real. Show me the truth. That's enough. He'll meet you there. And if you already know him but you've been living far from him, it's time to come home. Don't wait. Don't bet your eternity on tomorrow. He loves you too much to leave you where you are. And I love you too much to stay silent. If this story moved you, please leave a comment with your first name and where you're from. I want to pray for you by name. And if you feel led, share this video with someone else. You never know who might be standing at the edge of eternity, just like I was. Click the subscribe button so you don't miss more testimonies like this. And if you want to support this message reaching more people, consider hitting the thanks button below. Every bit helps spread the truth to those still searching. I'm Darren Whitmore. I died. I saw eternity. And I came back to tell you that Jesus is the only way. Choose him while you still can.